Should Trump be purged from the ballot for having committed insurrection, or should he be defeated on the ballot? But in a national election, in some ways, the argument that I made just 5 minutes ago was essentially that yes, go ahead and ban Trump from the ballot because. That number one, somebody else will have to run as a Republican, and that'll shift a lot of dynamics. And number two, I think Trump's movement will die without Trump. But the flip side argument, and by the way, the fact that the vast majority of people who are saying Trump needs to be defeated at the ballot box rather than in the courts are Republicans. There's almost, with the exception of Chris Christie, well, even Chris Christie, they're all the Republicans are saying no, he shouldn't be kept off the ballot. You should just defeat him on the ballot. And I have to admit, having Trump on the ballot may actually be a good thing for Democrats. I get it that it's going to raise turnout among his base, but I'm not sure it's going to raise turnout again among registered Republicans as a whole. So, I have no problem with him being on the ballot. I mean, obviously I do. I'd rather Trump just, crawled into a hole someplace and hibernated for the rest of his life. But, and I agree with Norm Eisen that it's never against American democracy to apply the United States Constitution to say, no, you can't do that. But here's where we stand right now. Maine and Colorado have thrown him off the ballot. Both those decisions are on hold, pending a review by the appeals courts and by the U.S. Supreme Court. 7 cases have already been litigated and dismissed. Minnesota, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, 2 in Florida, and 2 in Michigan. And all of those cases now have been decided in favor of Trump being on the ballot. A dozen cases were voluntarily withdrawn in California after the governor, Gavin Newsom, said no, and Connecticut, Delaware, Idaho, Kansas, Utah, Oklahoma, Maine, Massachusetts, Montana, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina. You have seen people in all those states submit cases saying Trump should be thrown off the ballot and then withdraw them. In some cases in the face of death threats, in other cases in the face of a lack of political support. In Minnesota's case, the state Supreme Court dismissed the challenge to Trump being on the primary ballot, saying the primaries are not federal elections. But the general election, they're holding their powder dry for the general election. So we'll see what happens in Minnesota when that happens. And of course, they're asking the Supreme Court to take this case up. Chris Christie said keeping him off the ballot makes him into a martyr. He says, and I agree. A Christie spokesperson said Nikki will beat Trump fair and square. It should be up to the voters. So, in other words, in the primary, Vivek Ramaswamy says this is what an actual threat to democracy looks like. And he has pledged that if Trump is removed from the ballot, he will take himself off the ballot too. Big sacrifice for Vivek Ramaswamy, right? He knows he's not going to win anyway. The guy is just, he's a hustler. He's a hustler. He's a business guy who some have suggested has been running what might be characterized as a pump and dump stock scheme to get rich. He seems to be, it's his whole pharma thing is very strange. Anyhow, what say you about all this? I'll pick up your calls on the other side of the break.